I'm in the middle of the audiobook of the Book of Enoch, and it's one of the wildest things I've ever listened to in my life.
The Book of Enoch describes a throne room, not a peaceful place with soft light and gentle music, a place of flaming crystal, burning rivers, and beings made entirely of fire. When Grok analyzed Enoch's account in full, without filtering or softening, what came back was not comforting. It was a description of power so complete and so consuming that even the angels standing closest to it cannot stop trembling. Why Enoch matters. Enoch is introduced in the biblical record with less detail than almost any other significant figure. He is the seventh generation from Adam. He walked with God. And then, at the age of 365 years, he did not die. The text says simply that God took him. No burial, no final illness, no recorded death at all. He went somewhere else. What the Book of Enoch preserves is an account of where that somewhere else was, and what Enoch saw when he arrived. The book is not a brief document. It is a detailed, structured account of heavenly realms, angelic hierarchies, judgment systems, and a throne room at the center of everything, described by a man who claimed to have stood in it, or as close to it as a human being could stand, without being destroyed by the proximity. The book is ancient. It predates most of the New Testament documents by centuries. Early Christian writers knew it. The letter of Jude, preserved in the New Testament canon, quotes it directly. The imagery in the book of Revelation, the wheels, the living creatures, the throne surrounded by fire, the books opened for judgment, draws from Enoch's descriptions in ways that are too specific to be coincidental. The writers of the New Testament were working with Enoch's account as a reference point. Grok's analysis identified the Book of Enoch as one of the most significant apocalyptic documents in the ancient world, not because of its religious status in any particular tradition, but because of what it attempts to do. It tries to describe, in language a human mind can process, something that human minds were not built to fully process. The strain of that attempt is visible in the writing. Words keep failing Enoch. He reaches for comparisons and then qualifies them immediately, because nothing in ordinary human experience is close enough to what he is trying to describe. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved the full text when other traditions set it aside. The reason for that preservation may be exactly what the Western canons found uncomfortable. The Book of Enoch does not present a deity who is primarily relatable. It presents one who is primarily overwhelming, and the difference between those two pictures of the divine is significant enough that people have made very different decisions about which one to circulate widely. Grok read the full text. What it found in Enoch's account of the throne room is what the rest of this script describes: the approach. Before Enoch reaches the throne room, he passes through structures described in terms that Grok's analysis treated as genuinely significant, not as simple poetic decoration, but as an attempt to describe an actual sequence of spaces leading toward a final destination. The first structure Enoch encounters is described as a house, although the word seems insufficient for what follows. The walls of this structure are made of crystal. The floor is crystal. The ceiling is crystal. Every surface appears transparent, allowing light to move through the entire space without obstruction. There are no dark corners, no hidden areas, and no ordinary materials that absorb or block what surrounds him. The effect is not simply brightness. It is an environment where light appears to exist as part of the structure itself. The entire space is filled with a radiance that does not seem to come from a single source. Instead, the materials themselves carry and transmit the brilliance around Enoch. The distinction between the object and the light becomes difficult to separate. Grok noted that this description may be important because transparency itself becomes symbolic. A crystal environment allows nothing to remain concealed. Everything can be seen from every direction. In a vision centered around judgment and divine knowledge, The architecture itself reflects the theme of complete visibility. Nothing in this space provides a place for darkness or concealment. The second major element Enoch encounters is fire. This is not fire in the ordinary sense, like a torch, lamp, or burning object. Fire is described as part of the environment itself. It exists around the structures, flows beneath them, and surrounds the path Enoch travels. Rivers of flaming fire move through the area, creating the sense that the entire region is alive with energy. The fire described in the account does not behave like normal combustion. It is not limited to one source point. It appears present in every direction, surrounding Enoch completely. Grok compared the intensity of the description to something closer to the overwhelming force of a star than a normal flame. The fire is not merely something that burns. It represents a level of power and presence that ordinary human experience cannot easily contain. The approach to the throne room follows a clear escalation. Each stage becomes more intense than the last. The crystal becomes more overwhelming. The fire becomes more unavoidable. The sound surrounding Enoch grows stronger. There is a continuous roar and a sense of movement that builds as he approaches the center of the vision. By the time Enoch reaches the entrance of the inner room, he has already been transformed by what he has encountered. He is no longer standing confidently as an observer. He falls to the ground, overwhelmed by the reality surrounding him. The text does not present this as a planned gesture of respect. It presents it as the natural response of a human being entering a place beyond ordinary existence. This is the point where the journey ends and the throne room itself begins. The throne. The throne that Enoch describes is not furniture. It is not a seat built for someone to rest in. It is an active structure, and Grok's analysis of the passage emphasized this distinction repeatedly, because the difference between a passive seat of authority and a living engine of power changes everything about how the throne room functions. The throne is described as flaming crystal. This is the same combination that characterized the approach, transparency and fire together, in a structure that burns and glows simultaneously. The wheels beneath the throne are described as wheels of fire. Around the throne, rivers of flame pour outward in all directions. The throne does not sit in this environment passively. It generates it. The fire surrounding the room is coming from the throne itself, radiating outward in all directions continuously. The figure seated on the throne is described by Enoch with the same reaching for comparison and failing quality that marks the entire account. The term the text uses is the head of days, a phrase that carries the meaning of the one who was before all counting of time began. The figure's hair is described as white like wool, clean, pure, and completely without color. The garments described are more brilliant than the crystal surroundings. The face is described only in terms of what it produces in Enoch. He cannot look at it directly. The brilliance is too complete. Grok's analysis of this section noted that Enoch never fully describes the face of the figure on the throne. Every writer who has attempted to describe the face of a presence that overwhelming has eventually arrived at the same problem. There is no adequate description available in human language, because the point of reference for that kind of brilliance does not exist in ordinary human experience. Enoch stops short of the face and the text moves forward. What the throne does, continuously, is judge and create. Grok identified this dual function as the most significant structural detail in Enoch's account. The throne room is not a place where decisions are made occasionally, recorded, and then executed elsewhere. The judgment is constant. The creative activity is constant. Every soul that has ever existed, every action that has ever been taken, every word that has ever been spoken, is present to the throne room simultaneously, not in sequence, not reviewed one by one, but present all at once in a way that the human experience of time does not allow for. The throne, in Grok's reading of Enoch's account, is running. It is always running. It was running before the creation of the world, and it will be running after the end of it. Enoch walked into a room where the operational system of all reality was actively processing everything that exists. That is what made him fall on his face. The angelic host. The beings that surround the throne are described by Enoch across several chapters, in enough detail that Grok's analysis was able to identify distinct categories and functions within the hierarchy. The innermost beings, the ones closest to the throne, are the seraphim. The name means burning ones. They are described as beings of pure fire whose primary activity is praise. They do not rest. The text is specific about this. These beings do not stop their activity at any point. There is no shift change, no period of rest, no interruption. They burn and they praise, continuously, without interruption. And the heat and light they produce is part of what saturates the inner throne room environment. Further out from the throne are the cherubim, which popular imagination has reduced to small winged children in religious art. Enoch's description shares nothing with that image. The cherubim he describes have 4 faces, not one face viewed from different angles, but 4 distinct faces, each facing a different direction simultaneously. They have multiple wings. They move without turning, which means they can travel in any direction without reorienting their bodies. They are described as moving with the speed of lightning when they move at all, and their eyes, and there are many eyes, on their bodies, on their wings, on every visible surface, do not close. The wheels described in Enoch's account, the same wheels that appear in Ezekiel's vision and in the throne room passages of Revelation, are covered entirely in eyes. They are not wheels in the mechanical sense. They are living structures that move with the living creatures, oriented in all directions simultaneously, and the eyes covering them do not blink and do not look in only one direction. The wheels see everything around them in all directions at once, continuously. Grok noted the overwhelming impression created by this description, and connected it to something that the text itself implies, without stating directly. The throne room has no blind spots. The seraphim see. The cherubim see in 4 directions simultaneously. The wheels see in every direction at once. The books, which Enoch describes separately, record everything. The throne at the center of all of this is the source of a presence that itself perceives everything the beings around it perceive. There is no corner of the throne room that is not observed. There is no moment that passes without being recorded. There is no movement, no thought, no deed that does not register. The scale of the angelic host is described in numbers that Enoch's language can only approximate. Thousands of thousands, 10,000 times 10,000. The beings surrounding the throne are not a small court. They are an assembly whose size exceeds any number system that the world Enoch came from had a word for. And they are all oriented toward the throne. All of them, all of the time, focused on a single point at the center of everything. Grok's assessment of this section of Enoch's account produced one conclusion that runs through the entire analysis. This is not a place built to comfort the beings who enter it. It is built to execute the will of the one at its center with perfect completeness and without any possibility of failure. The angelic host is not decorative, it is functional. Every being in that room has a purpose, and every purpose is being carried out without interruption. The Books of Judgment. The throne room contains books. Enoch describes them as open, not sealed and waiting, not stored and inactive, but open and active, with the record of every deed ever performed by every being that has ever existed available and present. Grok's analysis of this section focused on what the books represent as a system rather than as symbolic objects. In the context of the throne room's operational function, the constant simultaneous processing of all of reality, the books are the record that makes judgment possible. Judgment without a complete record is not justice, it is approximation. What Enoch describes is a system in which approximation is structurally impossible because the record is perfect and complete, and nothing has ever been omitted from it. The judgment process Enoch describes involves the weighing of what the books contain against a standard that is not negotiated and not adjusted for circumstances. Every deed is present. Every thought behind the deed is present. Every motivation behind the thought is present. The judgment is not of the visible surface of a life, but of the complete interior of it. Everything that was ever hidden, everything that was ever performed in private, everything that was ever intended and then not acted on, all of it present in the record and all of it subject to the same standard. Grok noted that this is the aspect of Enoch's vision that produces the most significant discomfort in readers who encounter it seriously. The problem is not the scale of the throne, or the fire of the seraphim, or the many-eyed wheels. Those are overwhelming, but they are overwhelming in a way that is primarily about power. The books are overwhelming in a way that is primarily about exposure. No human being living an ordinary human life has any desire to have every thought and motivation and private action reviewed by a perfect record in the presence of perfect justice. The instinct to avoid that review is nearly universal. The figure Enoch describes as the elect one, a messianic figure who appears in the throne room passages as an active participant in the judgment process, is described as the one through whom the judgment is executed. He sits at the right hand of the head of days. His role is not passive observation. He is described as the instrument through whom the fate of souls is determined, and his authority in that role is described as absolute. Grok's reading of this section produced the observation that Enoch's judgment room is a closed system. There are no appeals. There is no procedural mechanism for contesting the record, because the record cannot be incorrect. There is no argument available against perfect information reviewed by perfect justice. The outcome of the judgment process is not a decision that might have gone differently under different circumstances. It is a reading of what is already fully present in the record. For most people, that is the most terrifying element in the entire vision. The bigger connection. Enoch's throne room does not exist in isolation within the ancient record. Grok's analysis identified structural parallels between Enoch's vision and other ancient accounts of divine judgment halls and heavenly councils that appeared independently in traditions with no documented connection to the Book of Enoch. Across the ancient world, different civilizations developed their own descriptions of a realm where divine authority, judgment, and the fate of humanity were determined. The details vary significantly, but certain structural themes appear repeatedly: a central authority, an assembly of powerful beings, records or evidence concerning human actions, and a final determination based on what has been revealed. The Sumerian concept of the divine council provides one example of this pattern. In Mesopotamian traditions, the gods were often described as gathering in an organized assembly where major decisions concerning humanity, kingdoms, and individual destinies were considered. The council functioned around a supreme authority, and decisions were not portrayed as random acts of power, but as outcomes of a structured process. Divine beings presented information, matters were reviewed, and outcomes were established through a formal heavenly order. The imagery differs from Enoch's account, especially in the nature and identity of the beings involved. However, the underlying architecture remains similar. The interaction between the divine realm and human existence is presented through hierarchy, order, and examination, rather than uncontrolled action. The divine world is portrayed as a place of governance, where decisions affecting creation are carried out through an established system. The Egyptian Book of the Dead offers another striking parallel. It describes a judgment hall where the deceased enters before a divine assembly and undergoes examination. The heart of the deceased is weighed against a feather representing truth and order. The outcome depends on the condition of the person's life and the evidence presented. The judges do not simply decide based on preference. The record of the person's existence becomes the basis of the judgment. The connection with Enoch's books of judgment is found in the structure. Both accounts present a scene where human actions are preserved, reviewed, and measured before a higher authority. The individual is not judged according to appearance alone, but according to what has been recorded. The Egyptian tradition developed independently from Enoch's world, yet it contains a similar vision of a heavenly court where truth is uncovered. Grok emphasized that these parallels should not automatically be interpreted as proof that every ancient culture was describing the exact same location or event. Rather, they may reveal a recurring human encounter with the idea of divine judgment. Different civilizations, separated by geography and culture, repeatedly imagined a reality beyond the visible world where human actions were known completely and where justice operated according to a higher standard. From this perspective, Enoch's throne room stands out because of the level of detail in the account. The vision does not merely describe a judgment scene. It describes the environment surrounding judgment, the throne, the surrounding beings, the overwhelming holiness, the books containing human records, and the authority of the one who presides over all things. The completeness of the vision may explain why it became significant in some traditions while remaining outside others. A highly developed description of heavenly judgment carries a powerful message because it removes the possibility of escaping accountability. The scene is not limited to a single person or a single moment. It presents judgment as part of the structure of reality itself. The question of whether Enoch's throne room is currently active, whether what Enoch witnessed was an ongoing reality rather than only a historical vision, is one that Grok did not attempt to settle. However, Enoch's own account presents the throne room as something continuous. The beings within it are not described as temporarily gathering and then departing. The books are not shown as being opened once and then permanently closed. The throne is presented as existing beyond normal human time. If that interpretation is correct, then Enoch was not describing something that merely existed in the distant past. He was describing something that exists beyond the ordinary boundaries of human history. The significance of the vision, therefore, extends beyond ancient curiosity. It presents a claim about the nature of reality, that there is an unseen order where human actions are known, where justice is administered, and where nothing is forgotten. Whether viewed as theology, ancient literature, or a record of a spiritual experience, Enoch's throne room remains one of the most detailed descriptions of a divine judgment scene preserved from the ancient world. What it means for every person. Grok's synthesis of Enoch's throne room account ultimately arrives at a conclusion that the text itself makes unavoidable. Every human being described in the books of judgment will eventually stand before the review of those books. This is not a comfortable conclusion. Enoch's account does not present the throne room as a place that adjusts its standards for ordinary people or makes exceptions based on human weakness. The standard applied to every soul recorded in those books is the same standard. The record consulted for every soul is equally complete, containing what has been done, what has been hidden, and what has been revealed. The presence of the head of days and the elect one in the judgment process does not introduce uncertainty or personal preference. Instead, it introduces the authority necessary to carry out the final decision. Grok observed that the terror found in Enoch's account is not a form of cruelty. The throne room is not presented as a place designed to frighten people merely for the sake of fear. It is a place where justice exists in a form and completeness that surpasses anything found in ordinary human experience. The terror comes from the contrast between that perfect standard and the reality of human life. It comes from the difference between the flawless record contained in the books and the kind of person many people know themselves to have been when there was no audience, no reputation to protect, and no external reward to gain. The throne room vision forces a person to consider the reality that nothing remains permanently concealed. Actions, intentions, and choices are not lost to time. What humanity often forgets, ignores, or hides is presented as fully known. The vision creates a confrontation between the way people appear before others and the deeper reality that exists beyond public perception. Yet the mercy in Enoch's account, as Grok identified, is present, even though it is not the dominant atmosphere of the vision. The figure of the elect one introduces a dimension beyond simple condemnation. The messianic figure who participates in judgment is not described only as an agent of punishment. His role in the text also extends toward the righteous, those whose records, when examined, reflect what aligns with the standard of the throne room. For them, the judgment room is not merely a place of fear. It becomes the place where truth is finally revealed completely, where what was faithful and genuine is recognized without distortion. But Enoch does not reach this understanding easily. He arrives overwhelmed by the reality surrounding him. He sees fire, crystal, rivers of flame, and a throne that represents a level of holiness beyond ordinary comprehension. He enters a place where everything hidden is exposed and where no false appearance can survive. The vision was not given to Enoch to make him comfortable. It was given to him, and through him to every person who has encountered the text afterward, so that the difference between ordinary human existence and the reality of divine judgment could not be dismissed or ignored. Grok's final assessment of Enoch's account is direct. This is a description of a place defined by consuming holiness, perfect knowledge, and unavoidable justice. Such a vision is meant to affect the way a person lives, not through fear alone, although the fear described is real and connected to the seriousness of the judgment being revealed, but through an honest recognition of the reality Enoch witnessed. The throne room is presented as a place where every person is measured, every record is opened, and every hidden thing is brought into the light. The vision remains. The text remains. The throne room Enoch described does not depend on whether any individual finds it easy or comfortable to accept. Its message stands as a warning, a revelation, and a call to consider the weight of every human life. Enoch entered a realm beyond human limits and returned with a warning. The fire burns, records remain, and judgment continues. His vision demands a response. Read the Book of Enoch for yourself. Then subscribe. There is more in the ancient record, and we are only beginning to go through it.